But if you cannot get used to that in the language, then I don't think that you're going to be able to learn the language at all. 여러분 안녕하세요. 제 이름은 Marlon Ailester이라고 하고요. 저 한국말 배운 지 한 3년쯤 되었고요. 오늘은 한국어를 배우면서 하지 말았으면 하는 것들에 대해 이야기를 해볼까 합니다. So I have been learning Korean for a while, and over that period I have learned a lot of different things about what language learning really means, especially in the long run. Because I have always been a language lover at heart. I've tried to learn Japanese, Chinese, German, Hungarian, Spanish, French. These are all languages that I feel like I put a good amount of time in. I would say a few months at least at a time into these languages, but I never got as far as I did with Korean. And I feel like Korean is a very unique language compared to the rest of these languages. I feel like all languages are unique, but Korean is a very unique language. There's so many things that go into Korean as just a language culturally, and especially now with Korea having a huge K-wave moment with popular media and technology is booming, the economy is doing very well. A lot of people want to come to Korea and live here, and with that comes hopefully learning the language, right? And so if you are interested in learning Korean, if you just want to kind of put your feet into the water and see what it's like, this is a good video to show you from somebody that has learned Korean the things that I wish that I did not do or did a little bit less of while learning Korean specifically. So the first thing I want to talk about is something known as 높임말 or 존댓말 in Korean. 제가 한국말을 처음 배웠을 때는 제가 생각했던 것은 반말을 앞으로 더 많이 사용할 것 같다고 생각했는데, 사실은 일반적으로 사람들이 밖에서 모르는 사람들한테나 회사 친구들한테나 보통 존댓말이나 높임말로 얘기하는 거예요. Usually when you're going around out and about and when you're at work and stuff like that, people are just speaking in 존댓말 because it is usually when you don't know somebody, you want to speak in the formal version of the language of Korean. Korean has two ways of speaking. They have a casual way and they have a formal way. And casual way is good for your family, your friends, people younger than you. But in a formal way, it is always a nice way to speak to somebody, even if they are younger than you, even if you're really close. Speaking in a formal way is not bad. And that is something I didn't understand about the culture until years later. Even if you are friends with somebody, even if you are very close, you can still speak in a formal way. I feel like with English or with other languages, that isn't really the case. You wouldn't want to speak to your friend like you're speaking to your boss. So I kind of took it that 반말 is like the cool way to speak to people, but that is not the case at all. A lot of the times you can speak in 존댓말 to people that you really care about, and it is fine. And so when I first started learning Korean, I would speak to all of my friends, even if they were older than me, I would speak to them in 반말, and that is such a stupid thing to do. Because later on, especially if you want to live here long term, you will end up using 존댓말 way more often than you might assume. And maybe that's just me, but I'm warning people that are trying to learn Korean now to think about that, because 존댓말 becomes so important, and even years later it affects me now. Sometimes it would feel a bit awkward for me to use 존댓말 or 높임말 because I never really practiced it that much. And a really interesting point that somebody pointed out to me was when Korean children are first learning Korean, when they're really young babies, even like 1 year old, 2 years old, older people, their parents, their grandparents, even speak to them in formal language. And the reason why is so that they can become used to that culture, so they can become used to the division of how to speak to somebody structurally in a sentence, because it's really easy to learn how to speak in a non-formal way. So if you learn the formal way and you master that, learning the non-formal way will be a very easy thing for you to do. So that is my tip, is to just speak to everyone and anyone in 존댓말 always, even if they're your friend. If you want to practice, you can practice in 반말, but I would suggest please try at the very beginning, always try with 존댓말. 두 번째는 약간 문화적인 문제인데, 제가 한국말을 배웠을 때는 그 호칭이 엄청 어려웠어요. 처음에는 호칭을 제가 2년 동안 별로 안 썼던 것 같아요. 그거는 엄청 큰 문제인 것 같아요. Titles in Korea are very important, and not for a lot of reasons you might think. So titles in Korean are really important, and it's something that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of foreigners. These things don't really exist in a lot of other languages. In Spanish, there's like señor, señorita, those kind of things exist, but in Korea, it is like another level. Everyone has a title for something. And so it can be kind of confusing or difficult to use these titles. So I just kind of thought, well, I'm a foreigner. People don't really care if I'm using the correct titles or not. But in my opinion, that is kind of othering you from the society. If you want to live in Korea, it is othering you because you are not participating in the language in the same way that the native speakers are using the language. Just because you're a foreigner, you are giving yourself an exception, or I was giving myself an exception. I don't think that that is good for language learning and integrating into the society if you want to continue to do that. So after a while, of course, now I use the titles way more accurately and way more commonly. It doesn't even feel, it would feel weird if I didn't use them now. But when I first started using them, it felt so strange because I never used that before. For years, while speaking Korean, I never used titles, so it felt extremely weird. But if you can get used to it from an early stage, I think that is the best possible option. And these are things like 누나, these are things like 언니, 오빠, 형. But they're not just that, they're also like 선생님, they're also like 사장님. If you can get used to 선생님 and 사장님, 오빠, 형, 언니, 누나, these kind of things should also be easy as well. And now, something that I have heard from a lot of people that have come to Korea, especially from language schools or at university, people say that because they watch K-dramas or they listen to K-pop, it can feel a bit cringy to call somebody 언니 or 누나 or 오빠 or hyung, and that I can totally see because the media portrays these titles in a very different way than how they are used on a normal everyday basis. But if you cannot get used to that in the language, then I don't think that you're going to be able to learn the language at all, or at least not to a point that you feel like you are comfortable living in Korea or speaking to Korean people on a common daily basis. And if you're just doing it for fun and you really don't want to learn the titles, by all means, go ahead. However, if you are meeting Korean people and they tell you that you don't have to use the title, it's fine. By all means, you don't have to. But I definitely think if you want to be much more comfortable in the usage of Korean or living in Korea, learning the titles is really important, and learning how to use them is really important. Trust me. 마지막으로 한국말로 얘기하면서 실수하면 괜찮아요. 당연히 괜찮은데 실수를 하면서 배울 수 있단 말이에요. 그것뿐만 아니라 제가 생각하는 것은 진짜로 실수하면 그 실수를 절대 안 잊어버릴 것 같아요. When I first started learning Korean, and I would make mistakes because I always thought, well, I'm just gonna learn how to speak as normally, as naturally as possible. So if I make a mistake, it's okay, I will be corrected. And I was right. But there were some times where I would make some really embarrassing mistakes. And those are the mistakes that have stuck with me the longest and the hardest. But they're the ones that have helped me to continue to use that mistake that I did. I learned how to use it correctly. Those moments where I made huge mistakes in what I was saying or what I was talking about, those were the moments that I felt like I learned the most and that I would never forget. And so even though it was very embarrassing, it's okay. It's fine to be embarrassed because in the long run, it's not really that huge of a deal because I can look back on it and laugh. And you know, it's hard to always think like that. However, I want to give an example. There's two different types of titles for people. If you call someone 언니, that is a girl calling a girl an older sister, basically a friend. And then for a boy, you would call the older girl, you would call her 누나. And so I'm supposed to call people 누나. I had a friend that I would just call her 언니 the whole time, and she would never correct me until one day she finally told me, hey, you've been calling me 언니 like a few times, and I don't know if you know if that's right or not, or if you're just trying to be funny. I was not trying to be funny. I don't know why in my brain those two always switch for some reason. I was so embarrassed because it's a mistake that it will happen, you know? I was so embarrassed because it's a stupid mistake, and I will always look back on that, and from then on, I will never make that same mistake. And so these are things that I feel like if you are embarrassed by it, it's fine to be embarrassed. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. You should make mistakes. You are not a native speaker and you are an adult learning this language. Even children make mistakes. When I was a teacher, the children make mistakes all the time, but nobody's laughing at them. No one is looking at these children and thinking, wow, you're so behind on the language. You don't understand what you're saying. You sound so dumb. Who would say that to anyone? No one would say that to a kid. No one is going to say that to you, I promise. Especially if you're speaking to native speakers. The native speakers are going to just be happy that you're trying the best. And I feel like that goes for any language except for maybe French. I don't know. But in Korea, I have never had somebody genuinely making fun of me for speaking Korean. The only time that has happened was another foreigner, and their Korean was worse than me. So keep learning Korean and don't give up. These things are something that I had a lot of difficulty with, and I still struggle with now. So if you think my Korean is good, just know that I always mess up. And even though I mess up, I learn from these mistakes anyway. So thank you for watching. I hope you continue to learn Korean. Tell me if you have any other questions about Korean, how to learn Korean, or have you had any funny experiences when learning Korean? Because I have way more that I would love to talk about later. But I appreciate you for watching and thank you. And I will see you next time for some more videos in Korea. 끝까지 봤으면은 진짜 감사하고요. 이거 약간 비밀인데 그 다음 올릴 건 동영상이 다 한국말로 될 거예요. 아직 안 찍었는데 그런 계획이 있어요. Okay, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.